Welcome back to Home Studio Production Basics. This is a series all about helping you up the value of things you create from a home studio. This is episode 11. I've titled it New Studio Priorities. Essentially, if I were to recreate this place from scratch, like start everything over from nothing, what would I do first? What type of gear would I get? What type of process would I have? I'll give you a hint. What I'm about to share with you is just 4 things in order of priority, but it may not be the things you would expect, and it may not be in the order that you would actually expect. So let's create this home studio, but let's also acknowledge there are so many decisions for you to make when you're just getting started. Maybe you have some gear or no gear, and you're trying to put all of this together so that it's a comprehensive platform for you to create content from home. You'll need to get a microphone. You'll need some sort of a camera. There's so many decisions between those two alone, it'll drive you crazy. How about a computer? Do you want to use that as part of your setup, or maybe an iPad, a tablet, something like that? What type of lighting will you use? Natural, electronic, ambient, shadows? How are you going to handle that situation? How about software you'll need on a regular basis, especially if you're recording or live streaming? And also an encoder. Are you going software status like OBS, or are you going to do something hardware like a Blackmagic A10 Mini Pro? So all of those things, right, need to be considered, and it's a lot. But let me single it down to these 4 things in terms of priorities: the space, lighting, audio, and video, in that order. So actually, things that have nothing to do with technology, like the space, is actually most important. I guess the space also relies on an internet connection and proper electrical outlets and any type of, infrastructure you need, but the space is the space. We'll get into that in a second. Lighting is actually more important than video, and audio is more important than video. Everybody focuses on how things look as number 1. And yes, in the end, that matters a ton. I'm not saying that number 4 doesn't matter here. I'm saying that 3 things actually matter more than the video product you are creating. So let's talk about the space. What do I mean by the space? How about the background? What is directly behind me? Yeah, it's got to be somewhat appealing, not distracting. A lot of things to it. Space and angles, how we're going to use this background. It also needs to be controllable. For example, what if there's a window out to a street behind me? Number 1, I'm not sure how that would work lighting-wise. It would take some work to make it work. But also, I can't control what happens in that window behind me. So this is a very controllable background. Space and angles, how much room do I have in this room to make a camera distance work, a proper camera distance? How about the distance from the background to me, the subject? Like I want there to be adequate space so it doesn't look like I'm plastered with my back up against a wall. Inviting, and I keep using my own background as an example. Maybe it's a little bit overwhelming more than inviting, but can you make a space that is appealing enough to the eye that somebody doesn't instantly go, whoa, that's hard to look at, or that's hard to hang with for, 5 minutes at a time? I said controllable earlier, and I guess that's a large part of making something repeatable. I could be here in this space at 5 in the morning, 5 at night, 12 noon, midnight. It doesn't matter. The windows are all blacked out. So everything is controllable lighting-wise, and the camera doesn't ever really move. It's also repeatable. I walk in, I turn a couple things on, push a few buttons, and everything is just how I left it. Repeatable is important because you want to be able to not have any hurdles or setbacks in starting to create content. When you're ready to go, you want to go and be able to make what you need. And last but certainly not least, is this space comfortable? And for me, a little bit cramped in here. If you would see this actual room and space, it's not huge. It's smaller than you'd think, but it's comfortable for me. The lights aren't too much. The headphones are the one I like. The chair is not bad. The table's at the right height. It's taken a while to dial all this stuff in, but is it comfortable for me and anybody else that's going to use it? Okay, so after the space, let's get to number 2, lighting. Now, again, lighting is more important than video. I guess they work in tandem, but lighting to me is even more important than audio, and that's huge. Lighting is everything. If you can't see the subject, if somebody's improperly lit or poorly lit or distractingly lit, you're going to have problems. It's going to be hard to get past that for the average viewer. And I'm not even saying that you need to have a whole lighting setup in your home studio, like 1, 2, behind me 3, a couple LED strips, a couple hair lights behind me. I'm not saying you need even all that. You can actually use the sun. Natural lighting works fine if you know how to use it and get your color temperatures right, get your shadows right, maybe even use a reflector. You can do this properly without a single bulb or LED. There's no question, but you need to decide, are you using one or the other or a little bit of both, and how exactly are you going to do this? Lighting's also important because you want to be evenly lit. You don't want half your face to look like it just came out of a volcano and the other half, dark like a shadow, unless that's what you're purposely going for. But again, if you're creating content that's going to be consumed over a long period of time, if this isn't something artistic, then you're probably going to want more of an evenly lit subject, if it's yourself or anybody else, than trying to go too dramatic. Complementary. Of course, I want the lighting to be complementary. Maybe a little warm on the skin tones. I want most of it to be down lighting, kind of a natural look that we're all accustomed to, so that the shadows aren't up above me, they're down below me because the lights are coming down on me. You generally want soft lighting. What I have here in the home studio that you can't necessarily see is diffusers on all of my lighting. And actually, the bigger the light and the bigger the diffusion, the better. Think about a flashlight. If I were to shine a flashlight right here on the center of my forehead, it would probably reflect and show imperfections and look a little bit oily and greasy on my skin. That just would not be good. So complementary lighting is what you're looking for. And to do that, big, soft lights, as soft as you can get. And last but not least here, in terms of lighting, just experiment, right? It helps if you know what you're doing. No question about that. But I think even if you're pretty sure, just try, move things around. How does this work? What happens when the light gets closer or farther away? Or I tilt it at an angle so it's not directly on the subject. You can spend so much time to get this right. Quite honestly, what you're looking at right here are lights that don't ever really move. But when I did set them up to look like this, I spent hours tweaking and making small, fine adjustments and sometimes coarse adjustments. But just doing the things and then seeing what results they would produce. If I liked them, was it too much of a change? Do I cut that change in half? So don't be afraid to experiment with your lighting. Okay, the space and lighting are more important than audio, but let me tell you how important audio is. People are going to turn off, if you're making video content, they're going to turn off your video if the audio is bad. They might suffer through low quality video. And I mean, like, because it's on a webcam or because it's 720 and not in HD, they might stick through that with the video. But if they can't hear you, or it's muffled, or it's really fatiguing on the ears, or it's piercing in their ears, they are going to turn it off. Audio before video. And I'm a video guy. I'm a TV guy, but audio is most important. So how do you get good audio? Number one, you're probably never, ever, ever using the camera mic. You're using an external mic, maybe a studio mic. Doesn't matter if it's dynamic, condenser. I've got videos on that, by the way. Lavalier mic, fixed mic on a boom arm, all the above. Just an external mic that gets it closer to you, the subject who is speaking, or subjects, if it's anybody else speaking. Mic placement is so important. That's obviously part of the external mic. And how about mic technique? How you actually work this mic. For example, what if I put it over here? How does this sound? Because this is poor technique. This is bad placement. I'm not working the mic at all. And conversely, how about this? What if I'm all over the mic like this? Like, this is bad mic technique. It's close talking it, but you're not supposed to close talk this mic in the way that I've got it gained up and gain structured. It's not a good idea. Know how to work your microphone. Usually speak into it from kind of this this hang loose distance away. That's usually good. Make sure you're facing it the right way. Make sure you're not all over it. Make sure you're not too far away from it. I've got a whole separate video on mic technique, but understand that is part of getting good audio. This signal chain from this mic, where does it go next? An audio interface, a computer? Does it go straight into the camera? I'm not saying that there is a necessarily best way or right way or wrong way. There's a lot of different ways. Just make sure that you are doing it a right way that works and you're checking what you're recording so that you are getting good audio, including good clarity. And sometimes if you have the option to use EQ, equalization, you might want to cheat it a little bit. You might want to roll off the low end a little bit to enhance the clarity of speech, or the mid-range. You might want to give that a little bit of a boost, or the top end. You might want to give it some of that sizzle. So clarity is super important. If I'm very muffled into this microphone, imagine if the whole video sounded like this. Would you want to listen? Absolutely not. You would not. And just do not make your audio fatiguing, right? You should be able to listen to this for 5, 10, 50 minutes at a time. And so long as the processing that you might use, or just the microphone as dry as it comes, just make sure that it's not a fatiguing setup for your audience. Okay, and last, and definitely not least, I'm not downplaying video, but I am telling you, among everything else, it is the most forgiving. And a lot of times people nowadays are watching on their phone. So what, a 6 or 7 inch diagonal screen. So video can be forgiving. But I'll tell you what still goes into it and what's still extremely important. Shot framing. For example, I don't want this camera looking down on me too much, or up on me too much, or profiling me too much from the side. I'm trying to get it, in this case, just straight on. Exposure. Now, with all the lights in the background, how does my face contrast to it? I actually think this background's a bit too bright. In the future, when I make some alterations, I might tone that and darken that down. But exposure on the human first. Is it proper? And then can you also get the background to match afterwards? How about color balance? We talked about daylight versus electronic lights, artificial lights. How do you balance the color temperature? Because you do know the sun is a lot more blue than a lot of these warm lights that you're going to use. And if you contrast the two, you will instantly see that you're working with a difference. So get the color temperature right and the color balance right between the lights you're using and the camera settings you're using. Also, depth of field, if you don't know what that means, it's basically how blurry can I get the background? How narrow can I get the depth of field so that hypothetically only my face is in focus, but this background behind me, like that reclaimed wood wall, yeah, it's blurry and out of focus if it were all by itself. But that's on purpose. How can you adjust your camera settings to get a nice depth of field? Now, some cameras, like webcams, they're not going to be able to do this. DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, they will be able to do this, especially considering different types of lens options you've got. Now, I can make that into a whole separate video, won't touch it here, but just understand that depth of field also is usually a big difference of what looks great and what looks just okay. And then the last thing for video is you just want your look to be consistent, right? You want it so every time you make a new piece of content, if this is your home studio, that it looks like this. And the only difference is I'm wearing a different shirt than yesterday or 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago. Everything else you're trying to make consistent every single time with your video. Same brightness, same background, same everything if that's what you're going for. So those are my new studio priorities. Again, if I were starting all this from scratch, I'm not sure that's the order everybody else would do it, but that is definitely the order I think is most important and the one that you should know about.